Hey everybody, this is Perch, and I'm here with Joe Corallo. How you doing?
I'm all right, Perch. How are you?
Well, I'm doing okay. It's Captain America's 80th anniversary. We are seeing a number of announcements around how Marvel is choosing to celebrate it, but I think you and I are about to celebrate it by talking about a pretty epic run from about 30, almost 40 years ago now.
Yeah, this is it's over 30 years ago. Is the whole Captain America No More, where Steve surrenders the shield and the costume and the namesake,
Hmm.
and John Walker takes over. That's issue 332 during Mark Gruenwald's run,
Yeah.
and continues on for a year and a half. It's issue 350 when Cap
Yeah.
finally regains the Captain America mantle.
And it's important for people to remember that this was when comics were actually shipping monthly. There weren't extra ships, so it didn't go weekly and nothing like that. It truly was a year and a half.
Yeah.
Captain America out of the costume, John Walker there, and this is good timing because we're about to get the Falcon and Winter Soldier series, which is
Yes.
in theory going to borrow heavily from all this.
Yes, it's going to. I believe Flag Smasher is also supposed to show up in it.
Yeah, that's what I've
Yeah.
heard. Of course, John Walker is there, and it's
Yep.
this kind of mantle, this legacy of Cap. Obviously, will be a different story because of Chris Evans and all that. But uh, I don't know this series. We were talking a little bit before we started recording that Captain America during this time period it was an excellent comic. It had a lot of subplots and a lot of depth to it, and I think a lot of you made the comment that a lot of people remember Chris Claremont during this time era doing subplots and doing these
Hmm.
very detailed storylines, but lots of comics were during this time.
Oh, absolutely. That was kind of the modus operandi of every major Marvel comic and even DC comics. Jerry
Mm-hmm.
Conway and Doug Mank's Batman runs, going back and forth between Batman Detective, was very similar.
Yep.
But beyond that, you can make the argument that part of that was they were doing stuff at Marvel first, and you
Sure.
look at the way Jerry, in particular, did his Spider-Man run, which is something else we'll eventually talk about on
Yes.
one of these because I love it.
Yes.
And you could give a lot of credit to Jerry for being why Spider-Man continued to be a major seller after Stan's departure from the book.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But it, all of it is these subplots and creating new and compelling characters. Um, for example, with Jerry's run on Spider-Man, you had the creation of the Punisher.
Yes. Absolutely.
That's major, and he would create Killer Croc in his Batman run, and here with Mark Grunwald on Cap, he created, sure, he created the armadillo. We don't hit everything out of the park, but he
D-Man was
also
in there as well. I mean,
D-Man's also
yeah.
he's in there for a bit, but D-Man was supposed to be a loser. He was
Right.
never supposed to be a cool character.
That's true. But ironically, we're supposed to love him now, so he will be the next member of the X-Men.
Probably yes,
Yes.
but you had probably one of the bigger creations he had here, which we're not really going to get into because this comes more around the Bloodstone hunt, is
Right.
Crossbones. He's probably the most iconic villain that he created during his slightly over 10-year tenure on the book. It's close to 11. It's probably about 11 if you count him editing the book, because he was
Right.
the editor while Mike Carlin was writing Cap. But then at issue 307, they flipped, and then Carlin was editing while Mark took over the book because he just loved the characters so much. And eventually, Ralph Macchio took over as the editor. But there would be more editors down the line. Jim Shooter was still the editor in chief when this was going on, and by the end of all this, it's Tom DeFalco.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of moving parts here. But during this earlier tenure on the run, Grunwald's created Flag Smasher, who we're supposed to be seeing in Falcon Winter Soldier, who I think is a great character.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a lot of memorable pieces. I think he also had Scourge and several others that he brought during his time.
Yeah.
There is a mountain of IP in these pages that could easily become Disney shows, Disney villains, whatever it happens to be. It's actually quite astonishing how much material got stuffed into these. And maybe it's just I don't know if it's looking at the past with rose-colored glasses or not, but there's just almost every issue was introducing new significant things that then got built up and put together. This run of Cap No More starting in 332, you're not coming into that cold. They had been setting up this plot for, I was trying to go back to figure out how long, but a long, like more than a year, they had been setting it in motion.
Yeah, John Walker first appears as the Super Patriot. I think it's 323, around there. But even before that, the Serpent Society plays a big part in this. And the Serpent Society is, the seeds of it are right off the bat around 307, 308, where you have, towards the end of each issue, more serpents that are talking to each other. And then it gets revealed, more like maybe it was 310 or 311 when the Serpent Society really becomes a big thing. But they're setting that up, and the Serpent Society is another interesting way to go about this. Take, like, just looking at the landscape and being like, there's all these like snake related villains. Let's create the Serpent Society as a really interesting villain group for Cap to deal with. And I mean, the first character, or villain rather, he creates for this run in 307 is Madcap.
Right.
Madcap would go on to be more of like a character that would show up in things like Deadpool.
Right.
But
and Hulk and other things,
Yeah, but he started here with Cap and is a really interesting character. Madcap feels ahead of his time in quite a few ways. Because of how he's and look, I love Grant Morrison's Doom Patrol, with Richard Case and all that. We've talked about that. He's a bit of a precursor to Mr. Nobody.
He absolutely is. No, I've always thought so. And it's interesting to see these origins here of these characters. And again, all these characters, I think, that can be turned into pretty major pieces. We'll get to this a little bit later, but it is just amazing how much content was just spilling out of this run. And you're talking, this issue of Cap No More, starting in 332, goes to issue 350. You're talking several years. How long? Grunwald was on this book 10 years, like you said.
Yeah, issue 307 was July of 85. And then 442, I want to say, was his last issue. I think Wade started at 443. But that was August of 95. So,
it's hard to even believe. I mean, can you even imagine a run like that today? Especially for the big two. I mean, indies comics can do it, but you wouldn't see this anymore.
Yeah, you don't really see this anymore. And even then, you didn't see runs this long. I mean, other comparably long runs, like Michelini on Spider-Man, but even then was amazing, like 296 to like 388 in like that area. So like, almost 100 issues. So like that kind of stuff wasn't common even, but to have basically over 130 issue run was very rare. And it's interesting that Grunwald doesn't get talked about in the same way as people like Claremont for what he did. And to also build on a point you brought up before, there is so much IP here, which is part of what made the movies so infuriating. And I feel like you're probably going to agree here and
Yeah.
can jump in with your own stories. But I remember after Winter Soldier, we're 2 movies in, people I know, I would see movies with, I would hang out with, who would be like, I don't know what else you do with Cap now. They already did Red Skull and they did the Ed Brubaker Bucky stuff. I don't know what else you do.
There's nothing left.
Yeah, like,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
people were very genuine and serious and earnest about like, I don't think there's what else do you do with Cap.
I mean, absolutely, it's amazing how people's memories go from the origin, fighting the Nazis, some Red Skull stuff, Winter Soldier, and we're out. Like that is Civil War. We'll do that at some point, and they just you just skim over 40 years. And not 40 crappy years, but I mean, there were so many pieces in here, and not everything was perfect. Gruenwald did give us the famous Captain America addicted to crack storyline, which was not a highlight, but
no, we'll probably do Streets of Poison at some point
another day. Yeah,
but it's not that bad. But
no, I mean, I would take I would take it today. Before we go into this, I also want to get your take because with new news, by the time this goes out, maybe not. Ta-Nehisi Coates has announced that he's wrapping up his run in June with issue number 30. Where do you rank that? Where do you rank that run? I've talked about his work on the title and how I feel like almost it was set up for some failure. But what's your take on his run?
I agree. There was it was going to be almost impossible for anyone to follow that up because they're like, okay, well, you're going to take over. We had Wade do a few issues, but Cap's a Nazi. You're going to be writing Cosmic Cube Cap, and then try to figure something out with that. We completely destroyed all goodwill related to Captain America with a disastrous decision with Secret Empire, and not even the first Secret Empire, because nothing is new and original. So I'm empathetic there. I'm sad that we never got, up until now, who knows what the future holds, we never got Ta-Nehisi Coates' Spider-Man, because that's what he wanted to write. And I would be interested in that.
I felt the same thing as well. I think, what is it with this desire of you get somebody, because Ta-Nehisi Coates has kind of stated at various times he doesn't necessarily know the mythology of Cap. C.B. Cebulski, there was some comment about how he was going to come in to kind of help explain to Coates some of the bigger parts of the run. But at the same time, Coates is saying that he's a huge fan of Spider-Man, had apparently a pitch that people said they liked, but they didn't want to give him because he was too much of a fan, and he actually knew the character in the history. What are you doing? Like, why?
Yeah, it's disturbing to me, that kind of stuff, because it's like you're reaching out to a higher profile writer. You reached out to him.
Right.
To be like, hey, we want you to write for us. And then he's like, great, Spider-Man. And they're like, no.
Yeah.
It's like, so why are you doing that?
Yeah, I mean, and it also seemed like it became bait, because Coates, I don't know if controversial is the right word, but he has this built-in kind of reputation of saying things that are controversial in terms of America and some of its principles. Why would you then want to lean directly into that and say, well, you're going to write Captain America? Like, all that's going to do is you piss some people off. Maybe other people will be excited that they're going to see your take on it, but are those people reading comics in the first place? Are they going to pick up a month? It just seems like you're making all the wrong decisions to squander somebody who may have had a really good idea, but you're not going to tell that story.
Yeah, it was very bizarre, a missed opportunity all around.
Yeah,
I genuinely don't understand why they handled it the way they did. I don't get why, like, He did bring in some people like Roxane Gay and Yona Harvey, but both of them kind of like Roxane Gay is still doing comics, and Yona Harvey's fine. She's someone I know. I talk to. She's a professor. She doesn't need comics, but you know, and that's sad that I'm saying like she doesn't. So you don't need that comics money. You're a college professor.
Yeah,
but that's right. But yeah, he brought in people, and then that kind of got pushed to the wayside. I remember Yona Harvey. They were really pushing that she was the first Black woman to write Storm, which is true. And what was it? It was the Black Panther. Was Black Panther and the Wrecking Crew? I think it was that.
Black Panther and the Crew.
And the Crew, right. Yeah, the Wrecking Crew is the bad guy. Sorry.
That would have been a completely different comic.
That would have been.
I would have liked to have read that comic.
I would too. But then she did that, and then everyone forgot about that almost immediately after. And then, yeah, that's a whole thing. And then people, celebrate things that had already happened a couple of years later, because why not? But
it's just a strange collection of choices. I just don't get it. And it feels like it feels like intentionally steering into the worst possible decisions you can make. But
that's comics.
Yeah, that's comics.
That is comics. But yeah, it doesn't always have to be comics. And sometimes you get stories like this, which I know the only stories you can tell with Cap are Red Skull and Winter Soldier. I get that, but no, there is all these things. There is so much you could do just with Gruenwald's first third of his run. You could easily do a movie trilogy just out of that stuff.
Oh, absolutely. There's so much here that is good. It's dozens and dozens of issues. This particular one, the one that at least we're going to see play out to some extent, this idea of Cap No More, it is, as I mentioned, it's building from a bunch of storylines that had shown up. None of this was particularly a surprise. They were doing a lot of work with Captain America, showing his increasing dissatisfaction with the government and kind of what they were asking him to do, and the committee and the people involved. And it became this kind of lightning rod of Captain America standing up for his ideals. It gave him a chance to reaffirm. I mean, interestingly enough, in this issue that kicked off this whole storyline, he's walking away from being Captain America, but in doing so is reminding everybody who's reading this why he is Captain America and what's kind of core to his values.
So you're saying it's a comic that's well written?
Sorry, that's a better way to put it. I did that type of, yeah. You gave the no, absolutely. It's well written where everyone benefits, including John Walker through this storyline. He's clearly the wrong choice to be Cap, but it's written in such a way that you get to go on that journey with him of self-realization and all the rest.
He's the wrong choice, but it's also inevitable. You're watching the inevitable, like train crash or whatever it is. You're just sitting back and being like, this is happening. Nothing can stop it. Yeah. Which I love. You knew it was going to be John Walker when Cap ran away, because they set it up with his confrontations with Super Patriot that he was before that. And then they set up the what was it? There's that sort of bigoted crew down in Georgia that they set up earlier on, and then come back during the time where John Walker is Cap. And again, it's all they set these things up and then they pay it off later. Flag Smasher appears toward the end of this bit, but Flag Smasher has like a 2-part story with Cap earlier on, where it's the story where Cap has to kill a guy, and he kills a terrorist, And this is all part of why he ends up stepping away, because he is constantly reminded every issue or so that he killed a guy.
Yeah.
And he's constantly feeling like, on the one hand, he feels like he might need to like stand up for himself somewhat, but on the other hand, he's like, it goes against everything I stand for. I can't stand up for myself in this instance. So he has to like play this sort of difficult role of being like, I take full responsibility for my actions, but I don't condone those actions. And it becomes complicated for him.
No, and before that moment, we had that whole sequence where Nomad we had a couple things. We had the Scourge storyline take place, and we had the Nomad storyline take place of Nomad maybe crossing the line. It led additional weight. It's as if this writer was using the art of subplots and foreshadowing to tell a bigger story.
I thought subplots were bad, weren't they?
It's either subplots or captions, one of those two.
Okay, yeah, but I was pretty sure you weren't supposed to, that people don't like the subplots because it takes away from people sitting around and talking.
Yeah. I mean, I've heard that comic readers can't remember things for more than 2 or 3 issues. So it's weird to say that the events in, say, issue 320 were teeing up things in issue 340. That's 20 issues away. I mean, who even remembered? There was no internet back then either.
It's true.
It's quite an amazing thing. Well, things that were going on at the time. Of course, we had Spider-Man was in his black suit. Iron Man was having armor wars right about this time.
Yes.
And we get Steve Rogers, and I'm not jumping ahead, but ultimately this is going to give him his new identity of the Captain and a new kind of trendy black suit, while we get to see the reflection of John Walker as Cap.
Yeah. The Watchdogs were that group, by the way. I'm sorry I blanked on that, because the Resistors are also here, which are trying to liberate mutants. There's a lot going on, because they're trying to give you a little bang for your buck in these stories and have things happen in them.
But all these villains are the Red Skull, right?
I mean, yeah.
Okay, yes, that's that. I don't think he has any other villains besides the Red Skull.
Yeah, there can't possibly be.
Yeah, I slipped into sarcasm there, but in general, we get this kind of very well paced. We have, but there's a lot of people in this. We have Diamondback here. We have the Falcon. We have D-Man. We have Nomad. I mean, Iron Man stops in. There's a pretty large cast. Steve Rogers gets a beard for a while. You got that?
Yeah, there's a cameo from Black Panther.
Yeah, he gets a shield.
Yeah, there's a whole thing with the shield, because it's not easy. It starts with Tony, but then Tony has an armor war, and he can't accept the shield anymore from Tony, and then has to go and get it from T'Challa.
Yes.
And that's a whole great bit.
It is. I love the dynamic of they really play with this idea that Steve Rogers is taking his role and his place so seriously that he struggles now that he's not Captain America. He's not sanctioned with what his new line is. What can he do, and how far is he willing to go? He doesn't want to step onto the line of kind of vigilante justice. So even though, again, this entire thing is a story about how he's stepped away from the Captain America identity, every issue is him reaffirming why he should have it, or why he's the right person for the job.
And he has to think about these sort of things. So in order to convey this, because it's hard to convey these things in the art when these are complicated thoughts someone's having, that you can't really do panels of art that are showing these kind of thoughts. It would require some sort of balloon of thought to convey this to the reader, which I heard only morons and the elderly use thought balloons.
It's so old-fashioned. I couldn't help reading through this and thinking, God, this comic, it doesn't work today. I don't think this way.
I'm embarrassed by these thought balloons, and I couldn't give these comics to people because they would immediately open them and be like, there are thought balloons in here. Are you stupid?
Yeah.
You know, it's I'm glad that comics handled the terrible thought balloon problem that has plagued us all for decades.
I love throughout this entire thing, and I know we're skipping around a little bit. We should talk about the art here in a moment.
Oh yeah, it's mostly Kieran Dwyer, but there's a few other people involved earlier on. And but yeah, it's all good stuff.
Well, we get some covers by Mike Zeck. We get Tom Morgan's in here for a little bit. We get, but I like you're talking about the thought balloons. While Cap is kind of remembering who he is and the ideals that he has, and how does he navigate them, and who's more important, the man, the hero, or the costume. Simultaneously, and this is where I think, I mean, in this run, it's definitely a good showcase for Steve Rogers, but John Walker is handled with such nuance and care. They don't just bring in this crazy, government kind of jarhead person that's just wrong on every level. They take time. He has these dream sequences where he's kind of fighting different versions of himself. And I mean, they do such good work with Walker to set up a character that's going to then last for 30 to 40 years after this, not just as a replacement to Cap, but somebody who's actually three-dimensional.
Yeah, people were excited. That was a Christopher Priest who was doing the U.S. Agent miniseries. Not that just wrapped, I think.
Yes, it's either just wrapped or there's still an issue or two left, but it's and this is a character that's going to show up on the show. Mm-hmm. But one of the keys to that is they never treat Walker as a one-dimensional villain. Every time he comes in, they decide to add layers to how he's in this position, why he's in this position, how he is in his own way trying to live up to the legacy, even though he understands he can't.
Yeah, it's really done perfectly in the sense that Super Patriot is introduced, like I said, around 323, and there's a couple of instances where he shows up. Cap and Super Patriot do have a fight at one point. I think it's maybe 327 before all this happens. So they introduce Super Patriot, John Walker, in a way where you, as the audience, see this guy and you're like, this guy's a douchebag.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
But then he's offered the ability to be Cap, and something like flicks in his head, and he's just like, this is serious. This is like, Captain America's no joke. This is an honor, and I need to weigh this decision seriously. And then you see this character is more complex than you as the reader gave him credit for.
Right.
But, again, going to the incredible writing that is Mark Gruenwald here, he does it in a way where you don't feel like an idiot as the reader. You're just here for this journey, and you see, and you're like, oh, wow, I really didn't give him that much credit. It never comes off like you were too stupid to figure that one out. Like it doesn't come off like that. And you watch the character become more mature and have to make difficult decisions. Like, he was palling around with the Buckies and characters like that, but he had to cut some of them loose. One of them stays on as Bucky, but then goes by Battlestar.
Yes, we get Lamar, who becomes Battlestar, and that's just another character just kind of gets thrown out here with some depth to it.
Yeah,
but all of these, Jerome and these other characters that kind of take on their own identities, you see some difference. I mean, you're left wondering, and I remember reading this comic at the time thinking, maybe they're going to keep it this way. Like, again, it's going on for more than a year, and they seem to be settling in on Walker. Walker is growing and evolving and maturing and trying to do the best he can.
Yeah.
It created this wonderful dynamic where they were, you took the character seriously because the company and the writer was taking the character seriously.
Yeah, and he puts his life on the line. He deals with the Watchdogs early on. I think his first mission is,
Yeah.
him and Lamar have to go down to his hometown, and they add all these stressors to it. Like, this is happening in your hometown. You can risk uh, people figuring out who you are and all of that.
Yeah.
We later find out that this is all intentional because this is part of a grander plan, and he was always meant to fail.
Right.
They were intentionally putting him in positions to ruin the reputation of Captain America, because that was the overall goal of a segment of the commission.
Yeah, which was again was great in the sense that you have this guy introduced as kind of a douchey person. You build up his background. You do the stuff with Battlestar that actually builds up that character, and you find yourself slowly through this moving from I hate this John Walker character to rooting for him to succeed, because he is trying. Again, he's the wrong person in the role, but he's trying to do his best. You want it to work out. You find yourself hoping that things are going to happen, and then so that final reveal of basically that he never had any chance to succeed.
Yeah,
is crushing. I mean, it is it's just such a wonderful way of doing this.
Oh yeah, and this is also where we see a tie-in that's not that bad. Most tie-ins are terrible, but there's a Fall of the Mutants tie-in here.
Yeah.
339. To give you an idea of the longevity of this event, Fall of the Mutants happens a good 6-7 issues into this thing, and it's still going during Inferno.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
They don't do a tie-in to Inferno, but they reference Inferno, and then the captain has to deal with was it famine
Right.
at one point, and it just feels natural because the way Gruenwald sets everything up is it was just like, oh, there's this thing that's doing all this damage and killing people. We got to stop it. It just so happened to be famine.
No, it's this whole comic. I mean, every issue has a high amount of action. They're able to somehow drive character development while actually giving us lots of villains. I mean, there is a huge cast of villains in this.
Oh yeah. We get we get Famine, we get Flag Smasher, we get the Serpent Society, we get Mr. Hyde, we get what is it? We get Diamondback, who the Rachel Layton version of Diamondback, who is this like anti-hero. Do we trust her? Do we not trust her? So we're getting all that development here too. And then what was it? We don't directly get a Scourge, but there is an meanwhile bit to remind you of Scourge, because Scourge comes back, or at least someone pretending to be Scourge, I think, in the issue immediately after for 351. So there's all this stuff happening here. You have the Resistors, you have the Watchdogs. It's all these different villains happening. There is an incredible, it's just an oversized issue, 344.
Yeah,
that today would be a gigantic crossover event.
You're right.
But it's so quaint, because this issue, 344, is the members of the Serpent Society. I believe the Viper was behind this.
It was a Viper.
Yeah, she poisons the water supply in Washington, D.C., and it turns everyone who drinks it, including the president, into Ronald Reagan himself, into a horrifying snake monster.
Yeah.
And the captain, Steve Rogers, has to break into the White House and fight Snake Ronald Reagan. And it sounds silly when you say it, but it's a really good issue.
It is. No,
Yeah.
Kerwin Dwyer is doing an amazing job. Dwyer, sorry, not Dwyer.
Yeah.
Is doing an amazing job during this issue. You get a lot of villains. You get Snake Reagan. Now, I know this is. I don't quite understand though, because comics were not political back then. So how could there be a Snake Reagan?
No, absolutely not. It's crazy. There's all this government intrigue with the commission, and does the president know what's going on with the commission, and all these kind of things, and having these things happen in Washington D.C., having Cap actually say that not every president was great.
Yeah, that's true.
Very political rhetoric here.
How did so by the way, this issue where he fights Snake Reagan does end with Reagan more or less restored, but the final shot shows him with snake fangs. Is that
yeah?
I think continuity, we left Reagan kind of as a little bit of a snake monster at the end of this.
Yeah, and that's a little treat, writers can tee up for themselves to come back to later. It's But yeah, all this is happening, and then probably in part because the X books were so huge. Not only did you have that Fall of the Mutants crossover, but you have quite a bit, not a ton, but a decent amount of stuff with Val Cooper and Freedom Force. Right. They appear in at least a couple of issues during this, and they started appearing before the Cap No More stuff, to just keep things kind of like, all right, don't worry, we know those mutants.
Well, it felt like a very connected world. I mean, the interaction with Black Panther and Tony, and then the X-Men villains showing up, it felt like a combined universe where everybody was coordinating somehow. And you got a really solid complete story where the characters could lean into things. We do get to issue 345 where it feels like John Walker is trying desperately to live up to the legacy and do his and make it work. And he understands to some extent he's got a lot of work to do. I think Battlestar is helping him along. And then his family gets attacked, and he has to go in and kind of save them. And this leads to one of the most disturbing scenes. I mean, there's multiple in this book. I mean, you're trying to hang. They're going to hang him. These kind of, and then his parents get just gunned down, and Walker murders everyone.
Yes, it's really disturbing. And Kieran Dwyer's art here is incredible. I
mean, it's a strange. This is the Watchdogs group, and the comic is kind of moving along, I don't know, relatively like any other comic. And they go to hang him, and he breaks free. The parents are gunned down. Then we get like multiple pages of him impaling somebody with a rifle and throwing a pitchfork through. So, I mean, we turned to super murder, and then there's this final scene where it's not going to go well, and this is the impetus that has got to bring Steve Rogers back to the identity, where Walker is sitting there kind of cradling his super bloody bullet-ridden parents and talking to them as though they're alive about his new job. That went dark.
It's so powerful. It's powerful because these comics are usually not this dark.
No, not at all.
This is the darkest it got probably since Cap had to kill that terrorist. Well before this in that Flag Smasher two-parter earlier on in the run.
Well, because it pulled the rug out from everyone. I think comics and stories in general, this kind of episodic storytelling is good when you can keep people guessing. You can keep things shifting around, but not so much that it destroys the foundation you're building along the way. And in this one, we got the foundation of Cap. He's questioning things. He takes himself away from the identity. We're rebuilding up his character, reaffirming who he is. In comes John Walker. It's disconcerting that things have changed, but John Walker is slowly building up, better and better credibility. He may just pull this one off. He's got his friend there. He's making some of the right choices not to rely on his former friends who are now up to no good. And then this moment hits, and it is a complete, it's like everything you've been built up is over. And you get this shot with his friend kind of trying to talk to him, and he's clearly out of it, doesn't know what's going on. And it's, you move into right with these mutant terrorists here. It's a wonderful accounting. And at that point, you're going full speed ahead, and you get this shadowy Steve Rogers looking character now starting to emerge more and more on the scene, and you're getting kind of the picture of where things are going.
Yeah, it's give some context for people who might not be familiar with this. His two other friends who were the other Buckies who didn't come along with him, Hector and Jerome, who did not pass a background test,
right?
Stormed a stage for the announcement that not that John Walker was going to be the new Captain America, but that there is a new Captain America. They storm the stage and dox him on national television, which is how the Watchdogs know to find John Walker's parents and kill them. But this was all part of the plan of the shadowy figure who has ties to the commission. And to further make sure that John Walker is mentally unhinged, forces John Walker to fight the resistors on the day of his parents' funeral.
Right.
And is told you cannot, like, the reason you're still allowed to be Cap is you're basically on probation. If you do anything at all that skews from any orders, you're done. And again, this was a decision made to ensure that he was going to murder more people, basically.
Right.
Which makes him even angrier at Jerome and Hector. So he would threaten their mothers and then one of their fathers. And that leads to a fight in which he nearly kills them by burning them alive.
Yeah. I mean, you have this shot, and it's worth mentioning Dwyer is absolutely killing it at this point in the run of this shadowy Walker kind of threatening Hector's mom. The next time you see your son, tell him he's a dead man. I mean, there's just across the board, the expressions of the character, the story is great, but the art is selling it so well at this point. Dwyer, I don't believe gets nearly enough credit for what he's able to pull off on the page, because he's doing some of the best work in comics right about this time.
Oh yeah, this is an incredible story, and so much is happening. We haven't even touched on was it Nomad and D-Man's rivalry. They're not getting along, and Nomad just hates the guy, while D-Man's trying to do the right thing, but he's played off like he is a loser. He's the kind of loser that tries to make friends with money and doing favors, and it comes off very pathetic.
Yes.
But they're very upfront with that. And then he ends up being the one to sacrifice himself later in the story, or so we think, that he's dead. But he then makes this sacrifice in the whole Flag Smasher issue to stop these horrible things from happening by having to crash a plane, but he's not able to get out in time, and it's a whole thing.
No, I mean, everybody benefits. I mean, over the course of the entire run that Gruenwald was on this book, the amount of love given to the supporting cast, including just the C and D characters in this book. I mean, everybody gets at least a purpose. There really is no wasted character in all of this.
Oh yeah, no, there's no one wasted. We even get like a phone call with Bernie Rosenthal.
Yeah.
She's great. I love her. Um,
I
what was
like
it?
this. You mentioned this shot where he does go back and he finds Hector and Jerome, and he takes his revenge. And this last page here where he kills them both.
Yeah.
And you see this shot that Dwyer does where he's walking away from where he's got these two tied up. They go, I've got my arm free. I think I can reach and then it explodes, killing them both. And you get this red and orange, colored slight smile on Walker's face, and he goes right back into this dead eye stare. It's like this is one of the best pages in a comic. It's incredible.
This whole thing, it's so powerful. Everything leads up to it. Once you're reading this, once you get to, and not that everything else isn't great before this, but once you get to 344 with Viper's plan,
yes,
it's just, you're not going to want to put it down. You're going to be like, all right, I got to get to the end here. I got to keep going. There's just no way you're going to want to stop. Everything just leads up to this like big finale.
The entire, it reads not quickly, but it is like it's the equivalent of a show you'd want to binge today. You want to go through all of it, and it's great stuff. The two characters are on a head-on collision. Walker is definitely has snapped and is everything that we feared he would be at this point. We get the Flag Smasher showing back up again. And I love this back and forth where Smasher's got a hostage, and he thinks he's dealing with Steve Rogers. I think still at this point. And he's like, Captain, good to see you again. Now drop your weapon, or I'll use this sniveling scientist's brain for paint. And Walker's like, no. And he's like, well, what do you mean? I know you have a regard for human life. He's like, go ahead and kill him. You'll join him in seconds. And it's fun to see Flag Smasher completely at this point, even the villain's like, you're not the real Cap. What's going on?
Yeah, it's so good. And all of this leading to, 350, the finale, where, they finally state right on the cover the dramatic return of the Red Skull.
Right.
And we find out that Red Skull was the one pulling the strings to make sure that Cap's reputation would be tarnished by having John Walker be Cap, and to ruin the legacy of Captain America beyond Steve Rogers, just the entire legacy. Yes. And it's just brilliant.
It is. We've seen a lot of storylines where the Red Skull has some master plan. Obviously, we saw that in the Brubaker run. Lots of writers have done that. The Coates run is doing that right now, for that matter. Mm-hmm. The Red Skull having some big sneaky plan has been done many times. This one felt like the most kind of, I guess, authentically comic book.
Yeah,
and it had all the right elements. It was set up so well. It really was that. It's not enough to beat Steve. We have to beat the costume, the identity, the government. Everything. And that's why all this was pulled together. And it really pulls it all together very nicely.
Yeah. No, it's so good, and it's done in a way that makes sense, because I can imagine people who aren't familiar, that aren't familiar with the story, haven't read it, for the reveal there to be like it's the Red Skull. I'm sure a lot of people are like, oh, of course it's the Red Skull. It's so boring. Who cares? It's like, that's not how this is played out. The Red Skull hadn't been in the comic for about 50 issues at this point.
Right.
Like, this is a character they thought he was dead, but again, a very well-timed return that is probably comparable to Magneto being the person to return in New X-Men and Morrison's run, that like shocking sort of return, because they really don't, outside of the, like putting it on the cover of 350, all this lead up, they don't really make it seem like that's what's going to happen.
I love how when they do put all the cards on the table and reveal this plan, it happens over about 6 panels.
Yeah.
Like, it didn't take 12 issues of like, he just lays out the plan. It leads up to this final confrontation of Steve versus John.
Mm-hmm.
And John is further enraged because he believes he saw Steve, because the Red Skull is kind of wearing his face.
Yeah.
And so you get a really nice battle between the two. They've established multiple times, again, subtly. I get, you'd have to read this to really kind of understand, but at no point does the comic tell you, like in a little blurb, John Walker, scientifically stronger than Steve Rogers by 20%. They don't do anything like that. Instead, that when they have Walker fight Flag Smasher, he'll say something like, "You punch harder than Steve," or they nicely set up this fight at the end here where Steve is in trouble because they've established that John is more powerful than him, more reckless, willing to take more shortcuts. They further kind of show Steve kind of the different horrors that John Walker has done, and it's just a long fight.
Yeah.
In this issue, and Steve kind of has. I mean, he not a complete cheap shot, but he basically he's able to win, and then it's I think Walker then it's not a redemption angle exactly, but basically he helps take down the Red Skull that ruins his identity and turns him back into the Red Skull.
Yeah.
It's really well executed, and of course this leads to him resuming the shield, and it's almost like this is a good celebration of his anniversary.
Yeah, who'd have thought it would be a wonderful celebration of Captain America? It's a great way to celebrate Cap, is reading this, especially if you haven't in a long time. It's incredible. There's so much great work going on here. There's like we were saying, it's mostly Kieran Dwyer, but Tony Dzaniga, sorry, I'm butchering that name, does inks. Al Milgrom does inks for a bunch of these issues.
Incredible Mike Zeck covers, especially for the early part of this.
Oh yeah,
and some really solid Tom Morgan work. This shot of Captain America standing in front with kind of head down and this bloody flag behind him is one that we've seen a lot. I'm curious how much of this does get picked up and adapted with Falcon and Winter Soldier, but it's all right here. Again, the crazy part is you can go after this run, once Steve Rogers has regained the shield, right into a ton of stuff. I mean, we have the Soviets, we have the Bloodstone hunt.
Yep.
There is so much here that is given during this run that is absolutely incredible, and I don't know. It's not that hard to find these comics, is it? In terms of having them in trade.
Very luckily, the Captain is coming out again in epic format. You should be able to get it. Where you're going to be shit out of luck is the Bloodstone hunt after this in epic is out of print, and I believe Justice is Served, the one before this, is out of print, as well as the Suspiria Stratagem, that one's out of print. And I think the Society of Serpents is near out of print or out of print. Most of these epic collections are, but this one that has the Captain is going to be in print. However, the Captain Epic Collection, for no reason, starts at issue 333. So you miss the pivotal issue in that collection of him actually surrendering the shield.
You're fucking kidding me.
No, I am not.
Yeah, that's one of the stupidest things I've heard all week, and this is a stupid week.
Well, because instead they collected 332 in Justice is Served for no reason. The Epic Collection before that, which I believe is out of print.
Yeah, that's terrible.
Yes.
I mean, we've done a video on this before. I don't understand at all who's making these decisions other than a complete crazy person. Yeah, I mean, fortunately, I think on Marvel Unlimited, you can, these issues are there. So at least if you're willing to submit to that, you can get those issues on digital. It is a very worthwhile run. I mean, this entire Gruenwald run is just great. Yes, there's some weird stuff. Yes, you do have Captain America becoming a drug addict, and I think you have Captain America, Wolf Captain America, I think, during this as well.
Yeah. Werecap, if you will.
Werecap. Yeah, there you go. That's the not stupid way of saying that. But you get the positives massively outweigh the negatives, and I would argue again, Streets of Poison and some of these things are absolutely better than some of the storylines we've seen in recent years.
Oh, yeah.
This idea that Captain America becomes drugged and it causes him to react in a certain way is far from the dumbest thing you're going to read this year.
Yes.
Lots and lots of guest stars, the Avengers, villains everywhere. I mean, you will see everything from Magneto to the Kingpin to Crossbones to everyone. Like, we go through a massive rogues gallery of really threatening villains. Nobody is really treated like a dope in this. The villains are actually threatening.
Oh, yeah. No, for sure. I mean, there is bickering between members of the Serpent Society, and there are lighter moments in the run. But sure, the threats are all there.
Yeah, and it's very good. So if you're tuning into Falcon Winter Soldier, you're interested about parts of this. I mean, we'll see how the show plays out, but I'd have a hard time believing that they're able to do everything they do in this comic. I don't think we're going to get John Walker snapping and just murdering people with a pitchfork, but maybe Disney Plus will surprise us. We will see.
Yeah.
It's really good, and it's surprising. I don't think they've done so much to kind of whitewash a lot of this run in recent years that it's nice to go back and look at it again. I don't know. Very, very good era Cap. What's better for you for Cap? What runs do you remember that kind of would top this?
There's not much. Again, Roger Stern, John Byrne, which was very short. It was like 9 issues, but that was really great. Tremendous. But it's hard to find other runs that are really better than this, because there really is a lot going on here. We did go over the early Brubaker stuff, and I don't know. It's I prefer this.
I mean, it's funny when you read this. The Brubaker run feels less original. There's definitely some retreading there, but I mean, how often in comics do you get a 10-year run of this? You know, that's quality where you get to see a lot of different things. I mean, it's but yet kind of like we talked about it before we went on the air. Claremont gets all the attention during this era. But this was amazing, and I think you said it yourself. A lot of writers were using some of these styles.
Oh yeah, no, this was it was common to do these. You that's how you wrote comics at that point. You'd have your A plot, your B plot. You'd finish your A plot, and then one of your like B or C plots would come forward to be the A plot for the next couple issues or so, and you'd keep sort of alternating like that. That's just how you did comics. And Chris Claremont gets a lot of credit, rightfully so. He did a great job.
Definitely, rightly so, yeah.
But that other people were doing similar things. John Byrne was clearly doing that in Fantastic Four, and plenty of other comics. Simonson's Thor.
Mhm.
I mean, it wasn't just a series of one shots or one long story. That was like unbroken. It was it's a lot of things.
I'm trying to go. I mean, it is this. People ask a lot of time. What's my favorite era? I often point to the '80s. This is why, though, is in Marvel in particular. You had Claremont on X-Men. You had Gruenwald on Cap. You had Michelini on Spider-Man. You had Simonson on Thor. You had Byrne on Fantastic Four. That's an insane lineup of talent stories, and all of these were really long runs.
Yeah, it's crazy how it all happened. We're lucky that happened. We're lucky that they're out there to read. If people haven't, or you've been shy of Captain America, or you think like, oh, Cap works in Avengers, but I don't really care about his solo stuff, that's because you haven't read this. So, give it a shot. So stop sounding like an idiot and check it out.
That's the perfect way to end this. Stop sounding like an idiot. Hey, Joe, thank you very much for a very good hour here talking about a great comic.
No problem. Thanks for having me. I love talking about it, and we got to talk about good comics again soon.
Yes, good comics that's the antidote to so many things.
It really is.
Thanks for listening.